Welcome to this video. I'm sure you'll agree with me, modern cameras are stuffed full of functionality and are increasingly complex. Our challenge as photographers is to work out which pieces of functionality we can use both in the camera and in post-production to unlock the images that we see in front of us and we want to capture. One of the challenges I find quite often is I'm faced with an image that is very high contrast. It perhaps has the sun setting, or it has a very bright portion of the screen combined with some very dark shadows. I don't carry a full set of filters with me on all occasions. Quite often I'm doing travel photography, I don't know what I'm going to be up against, I perhaps don't have my tripod with me, and therefore it's about using some of the functionality that's within the camera that can really help me capture that image. One simple piece of functionality that we'll find in most cameras these days is auto bracketing, and that's what we're going to look at in this video. We're going to look at how you capture using auto bracketing and then how you use Lightroom to really bring those images together to create a much better output image that is closer to what you wanted. So as I said in the intro, it's not unusual for me to find myself confronted by an image I want to take, but that's got a very high contrast histogram attached to it. It's got a bright area, it's got dark shadows. I can't control the lighting because perhaps I'm in a cathedral or it's a sunset where I have limited control. And perhaps I don't have my tripod with me or can't use my tripod. So I can't use filters to control the exposure for different portions of the image, or perhaps I don't have my filters with me. I wasn't anticipating the need for them. Equally, perhaps I'm in a situation where I can't take a shot, check the exposure, take another shot, check the exposure, because perhaps the lighting conditions are a particular short window of opportunity to get the image. This is where I find auto bracketing really comes into its own. For those of you who haven't used auto bracketing, you'll find it in most cameras, and what it does, at its simplest, it allows the camera to automatically take a series of images with different exposures. You can then either pick the one that you like best after the event, or you can use Lightroom or a similar package to bring them together to create an HDR type image, which blends them together. So let's look at the process from capture through to post-production and what can be achieved. And let's start by looking at the capture portion of that process. So I found myself in London recently, and the weather forecast was meant to be that it was partially cloudy but sunny spells. So I wasn't carrying filters with me. It was going to be a day shooting street photography mainly. However, when I got to London, as so often with the English weather, it was low cloud. The sky was very bright but just plain white, and a lot of the foreground objects were quite dark. There was no direct light onto them, and therefore it created quite a high contrast image. I found myself up near Tower Bridge, and I thought it would make a reasonable photo of the old barges in front of Tower Bridge with the modern Shard off to the side. However, the Shard was partially obscured by low cloud, the sky was very bright, and the barges were quite dark. So it's quite a high contrast image. I had my GorillaPod with me. I didn't have a full tripod with me, so I set up my camera on the GorillaPod, which gave some stability. Obviously we were going to take a series of bracketed images, and therefore if you can, having your camera in a reasonably stable position is beneficial. However, you can do bracketed images handheld. Increasingly Lightroom, Aurora, the main HDR packages have the capability to align your bracketed images automatically for you, so that's a real help, and it can overcome a slight movement in between the images. There are many ways of doing bracketing. In the Nikon Z6, Z7 cameras, you have a number of options. I normally use AE bracketing, auto exposure bracketing, where the camera takes a series of shots at different exposures, and the way it does that is by keeping the aperture stable, in this case at f8, keeping the ISO stable, in this case at ISO 64, and then varying the shutter speed to create a different exposure in each image. On this occasion, the metering said that the optimum exposure would be 1/320th of a second. So it took one image at 1/320th of a second, and then it created another image underexposed at 1/640th of a second to create it one stop underexposed, and then one stop overexposed by using 1/160th of a second. The other options you've got for auto bracketing, particularly in the Nikon cameras, is if you're using flash, it can use flash to adjust the exposure, and in the Nikon cameras it can use active delighting to adjust the exposure as well. As I said, on this occasion I used AE bracketing, and that's the one I normally stick with because it's the most straightforward of bracketing approaches, and I tend to be shooting in RAW, so it captures 3 raw images of varying exposures. So let's look at how I set up the camera to capture that series of exposures. So you'll see that I've got auto bracketing set up on my I button. It's there. So we come in, we want a bracketing, we come down to the number of shots we want. I want 3. You'll see I've also got the continuous shutter set to high, because when we come out you'll see on the screen it's showing that we've got 3 shots, one stop apart. If we press the shutter button down, it will take 3 shots and then pause. Now if you don't have it set up on your I button, you can go into the photo shooting menu, and there's auto bracketing. You come through, and again you select the number of shots you want, the increment, the number of stops apart. You can set where you want them, and then hit OK, and it will shoot them for you. Turn it off, you go back to 0 and click OK, and you'll see we're back to normal. When I looked at the 3 images on the LCD on the camera, it was obvious to me that no one of those images was going to give me the output that I wanted. I had a bit of a vision in mind that actually, because of the nature of the high contrast image, that actually it would end up as possibly a black and white image. I wanted to bring out some of the details to create some nice details in that black and white image, and therefore bringing them together in Lightroom was probably going to give me the best result. So let's look at those images, and let's look at what I did with them in Lightroom to get to the final image that's on the screen next to me. So here we have our 3 bracketed images imported into Lightroom. The one here is the one that the camera metered for as being what it thought was the right exposure. So as you can see down here in the metadata, it was f8, ISO 64 and 1/320th of a second. We've then got the image that was one stop overexposed compared to that, which is again f8, ISO 64, but 1/160th of a second. And the third one is the one stop underexposed image, which is again f8, ISO 64 and 1/640th of a second. So we've got these 3 images, each of them one stop apart in exposure, and it's very simple in Lightroom these days. You select the 3 images and then you right click and go to photo merge, and you've got 3 options here: HDR, panorama, or now HDR panorama, so you can combine the 2. We're going to just keep it simple. We're going to combine these 3 images to create one image, one HDR image from them, bringing the best out of each of them. So we choose HDR. There's a series of options here. So you've got auto align, which will allow the package to align your photos. If perhaps you've been doing the 3 images handheld and you've moved very slightly between them, it will auto align them. There's auto settings here which will apply auto tone and colors to the merged HDR image. So if you want to harness the full power of Lightroom, you can tick that, make it really easy for yourself. You can see the difference in the image here. You've then got de-ghost amount. If you imagine in between each of those images, no matter how fast they were taken, things like the river there, the waves will have moved. So if you overlaid 3 images, you would end up with a slight ghosting. And what Lightroom can do here is deghost it, so it can make the image sharp. And what you can do is you can pick the intensity of that deghosting, and if you click on show deghost overlay, it will show you the red areas are where it has deghosted, the shadows beneath a few of the boats and the posts where perhaps it would be good to have a slightly clearer, crisper image. And then you can create a stack. I've already created a stack for my 3 images in Lightroom, and then you just choose, when you're happy with the image, merge, and Lightroom will take a little bit of time and combine those 3 images. What you will get is an image. This is the one I've created, and what you can then do is go into the develop module, and you can adjust that image to perhaps, as I've done here, I've added a graduated filter over the boats to bring out some more of the shadows. You can adjust the different settings in the basic settings to get the image to where you want to. I was looking to create a black and white image, and I'll show you that in a second. So I wanted a bit of punch in the different areas. It's not going to end up as a color photo, this, so I've created this with one eye on using Silver FX to then turn this into a black and white image. So let's compare this color image that I've adjusted. Is the merged image that I've then further adjusted with the original 3 bracketed images, these ones here, and this is the output one. What you can see is there is a lot more detail in the bridge compared to any one of these photos. So you can see the whole of the shard, which here you're starting to miss at the top. If you zoomed into this, what we can see is there's a lot more detail picked out at the top levels of the shard. As I said, what I'm looking to do is convert this image into a black and white. I tend to use the Silver FX package to enhance the black and white image that I get. And this is the final image that I got from my bracketed images. So as you can see, there's a lot more detail in these boats in the foreground. There's more detail in Tower Bridge, along the wall here. So I think, you know, the process of bracketing the images, bringing them together in an HDR file, then doing a little bit of post-processing, probably no more than 5 minutes worth of post-processing, and then converting it using Silver FX into a black and white image has really brought my vision of that scene through to a final image. It's not going to be an image that I particularly, you know, hang on a wall, but it demonstrates what the art of the possible is, using the functionality that's in your camera, the functionality that's in post-processing, bringing those together to deliver the vision you had when you saw that scene. I hope you found this useful in showing how you can bring together some simple functionality in your camera to capture images in a way that you can then transfer them into Lightroom, post-process them, and create that vision you had in your mind. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and you won't miss out on future videos. I look forward to seeing you in future videos, and I'll leave you with a selection of images that I've produced using auto bracketing.